Hello, I'm Sheridan from Cemetery Walks, and today I'm taking you to Glascote Cemetery. First of all, we're going to stop off here at Glascote Locks. So here we are at Glascote Top Locks, and we're going to meet one of the people later on who lived at that cottage. So this is supposed to be the hottest day of the year so far, so I've come out quite early in the morning, and it's rather beautiful this morning with still a little bit of a fresh breeze. Not yet into the heat of the day. So I'm walking along the towpath of the Coventry Canal, and we're heading towards Glascote Road Bridge. Now, Glascote is now a suburb of Tamworth, but back in the day it was a small mining village, and it's changed a lot since those times. So originally the cemetery was a really pleasant place, not surrounded by houses, and there were allotments there, but as time has progressed, the allotments have been taken over by graves, and now the graveyard is very nearly full. Because I'm walking along the towpath here, I'm watching my step as well. So we're now looking over the canal from up on Glascote Road Bridge, and the area to the right is where the cemetery is. You wouldn't know it from here. There's often boats moored here, taking advantage of the shops along the Glascote Road. And we're just heading up towards the gate leading into the cemetery. We're already a little bit away from the traffic, which is over there. And as we head deeper into the cemetery, you'll find it gets quieter and quieter. Let's go inside. First thing you'll notice is that some of the newer graves are along on the left hand side here. I'm not going to linger long on any of those because I don't want to cause offence to anyone who might be visiting relatives, so we'll move straight on in. There's just a few Commonwealth War graves here, not that many. Of course, the vast majority of people who died during the First World War and Second World War would have died overseas, but it's always interesting to see who didn't and why. And we will be visiting one of those graves shortly, but there's two there just to get us started. So that's leading aircraftman J.A.B. Day, who's a pilot in the Royal Air Force, and Gunner B.J. Arnold from the Royal Artillery, both of whom died in the Second World War. Right, so that's where we came in, and now we're going to walk down this avenue which separates the old part of the graveyard on the right from the new part on the left. And it's that new part that was built on the old allotments. And we'll head on down. going to pause here because I have a real soft spot for angels on gravestones. And here's a good example of one who has sadly lost her head. This is the grave of Dorothy, the daughter of the Stones, G and H Stone, I believe, or C and H Stone, it's hard to read. She died in 1930, Dorothy. One angel more in heaven, it says. And we end up with little dots where the letters once, whoops, hey! Looks like her wings have been repaired over time as well, so this poor angel has been through the mill. Let's have a look at her from the back. Yes, those cracks go right through. Right, let's head on down the avenue. What a beautiful morning. There's some fantastic pine trees here, and that's something I really love about being at the cemetery. All the wonderful trees and the wildlife that comes with it. When I last came here there were squirrels galore. We'll see if we see any today. So as we head down this avenue, the graves on the left are in general getting newer and newer, and you'll be able to see that it's packed now right down to the bottom. I don't know what Tamworth Borough Council's plans are from here on in. I suspect what they'll be doing is moving graves to one of the bigger cemeteries in Tamworth, like Wilmcote, from now on, but that is pretty well full. Right, so we've come from that direction, and the entrance was over there, and now we're going to head in this direction around the perimeter of the cemetery. So as we move in here, we're moving into sort of the 1960s, 1950s even, and some right back to the 1930s at this point, but we're not in the oldest part. This was the second bit to be filled. And yet there are still graves which are being dug today here because they've been pre-bought. Perhaps a spouse or something like that. So we're still walking along the edge of the cemetery, and the canal is just the other side of all the trees on the left. So the people on the boats would have no idea that there was a peaceful cemetery up here. Let's stop here and I'll see if I can show you where the canal is in relation to where we are. It's down there. Can you just see it between all the leaves? We're quite high up here. And we're now so far away from the road, the main road, Glascote Road, that all we can hear really is birds. A very noisy magpie somewhere. Right, let's carry on around the perimeter. wood pigeon making himself heard. You can see the corner of the graveyard there. We're now going to go right a little bit before we get to the path, because I want to show you one of my favourite spots in this cemetery. Now we're moving into the oldest part. And you can see there's a lot of slate stones here. It's quite a prevalent type of grave in this area, these slate ones, and people use them through from the 19th century right through to this one, 1928. They carried on using them for quite a long time. There's the occasional stone one in amongst them. B. Lycett of Glascote, Mary Ann, beloved wife of B. Lycett of Glascote, who died aged 57 years. Now, if we pop down to the bottom here, we can see who made this stone, and it was the Mitchell family who were responsible for, I'd say, probably about 80% of the stones, maybe more, in this area. They were Tamworth stonemasons, and you see their work everywhere. There's a Mitchell there, sorry about my camera shadow, and a Mitchell there. They absolutely dominated this area. Mary Ann Barlow and Thomas Barlow, another Mary Ann Barlow, and these were the family, John Barlow over there as well. This was the family, the Barlow family, who built boats in this area. Narrowboats, of course, working boats. The Barlow family has got quite a legacy in this area, because you can see things called Barlow everywhere here. Here's another headless angel, and you can see here a good example of those lead letters where they've fallen off and you're just left with holes. Sometimes there's enough holes that you can make out what the letter was, sometimes you can't. Right, this is one of my favourite spots. When I come here, quite often there'll be somebody sitting here relaxing, because it's shady, you've got a beautiful view, you can listen to the birds. It's a thoroughly pleasant place to be. Now, let's head over this way. Because here's a chap I'd like you to meet. Say hello to Willie George Allsop, who died on November the 7th, 1902, aged 20 years. Now, when I saw this first, I thought, this is erected by his fellow workmen, look. And my initial thought was, perhaps it was an industrial accident that he died aged 20. But it wasn't. So I can now tell you a little bit more about him. Willie George Allsop was born in that cottage I showed you earlier, beside Glascote Top Block, in 1882. In 1901, the census tells us he was working as a stoker at a brickyard, and he would have been kept busy cleaning, firing and watching over the boilers and the furnaces. Sadly, he died of tubercular meningitis. He does seem to have been quite a popular lad. His fellow workers, as I said, erected this impressive headstone for him. But he was also a staff sergeant in the Church Lads Brigade, and the Glascote company which he belonged to attended his memorial service. As you can see, this stone is starting to lean quite badly, and I hope that it gets repaired rather than laid down when the time comes. So there's Willie George Allsop. Now we've skirted past another grave I wanted to show you. And last time I came here, this particular grave wasn't that well cared for. It seems to have been improved a little bit, and somebody's been along putting some flowers here, which is nice to see, even if they're not real flowers. This is the grave of Tom Lawrence Williams, dear husband of Doris Wynne. Now, chances are you've never heard of Tom Lawrence Williams. His friends would have known him as Laurie, and I think you will have heard of what he actually did. He founded the Reliant motor company in 1935. The Reliant made the famous Reliant Regal supervan, and you'll know that because it's, well, you may know that because it was seen on Only Fools and Horses as the Trotter's van, and also on Mr. Bean. So the company was founded, as I said, in 1935, just down the road from here in Kettlebrook in Tamworth. And he started the business off by building a three-wheeled vehicle in his own back garden. Right, off we go again. Now I want to find you one of those Commonwealth War graves and have a closer look at that. Sometimes it's nice just to see the names. Shufflebottom, great surname. Let's go back past Willie George Allsop. There's some very worn stone here. Let's just divert for a moment and have a look at this one. Catherine Downs. Won't be long before you can't tell who she is. The facings of these stones tend to disappear quite quickly. I would guess that was around just towards the end of the 19th century, that one, so it's lasted about 125 years. And here's one that shows really distinctly how the facings disappear. That's Emma, beloved wife of John Thompson, from Meadowview, Kettlebrook. And also Kettlebrook. Eli John Thompson, husband of Mary Thompson. Right. And here's the young lad that we're going to meet. So this is George Brain. He was born just around the corner from here in 1889, and he was a ship's carpenter in the Royal Navy. And just before World War I began, in August 1914, he was posted to His Majesty's hospital ship Rohilla. On the night of the 30th of October 1914, the ship was caught in a storm, and it was a big one. Despite the best efforts of the local lifeboatmen, the ship was wrecked on the rocks off the Whitby coast, and tragically, George drowned. They did manage to recover his body, and he's buried here in Glascote Cemetery. Just 25 years old. I've shown you two headless angels, but here's one that is not headless. And it commemorates Paul Anthony Turner, who was 2.5, I think, when he died. Or is it 7.5? It's quite hard to read because, again, the lead's fallen off. There's a lovely little angel for him. Weep not, dear parent, be content, for I to you was only lent. Now the Lord has had his due, and very soon may call for you. I guess that was supposed to sound comforting, but I'm not quite sure, but it feels that way to me. Right, so there's George Brain over there, and we'll leave the angel behind, head back to the avenue that we passed down earlier. It's dividing the two halves of the cemetery. And now we'll head back to the entrance.